maybe.
You've got to wind your clock up, Peter.
No, I think you're too fast, mate. What's the time, Drew?
I've got 7:30. Okay, we're live on YouTube now, so I can start.
Right.
Okay, welcome to the virtual planning meeting on Tuesday, the 9th of June at 7:30 p.m. My name is Councillor Drew Heffernan, and I'm the chair of the committee. The vice chair of this committee is Councillor Kevin Burke, and if at any point during this evening I lose my connection, he will take over. As you will be aware, the council faced significant IT issues which interrupted parts of the council's network last week. And given the importance of ensuring IT systems were fully restored and resilient ahead of the meeting, the planning committee has been postponed until today. So I'd like to thank everyone for being available tonight at short notice. If you run into any IT issues yourself this meeting, can you please contact Cassie from Community Services, whose contact details can be found in the invitation for tonight's meeting. Before I begin, can I thank all the council officers for putting this meeting together, including colleagues from planning, community services and IT. And I'd also like to welcome everyone who's watching this on YouTube. As always, there'll be an audio recording after this meeting as well on the council website. I'll mention a few key points here so we can have a successful meeting, and then we'll carry on. So first of all, when you're not speaking, can you please turn your microphone off, as this saves bandwidth. You'll appear on screen when your microphone picks up sound as well. So if you can mute yourself, it will stop the feed from jumping randomly to people. During the meeting, I'll give people plenty of time to speak. So please only speak when you're asked to. And also please don't speak over other members when they're speaking. When you speak for the first time, can you introduce yourself? So if you're a councillor, say your title and your name, and if you're an officer, say your name and then your title. That will mean that people following on YouTube can know who's speaking. If you want to raise a point during the meeting, please use the chat function. This is where you can type in question if you have a question. And if you have a point of order, you can raise that there as well. I'll go to you straight away. Before taking other members. I'm just going to pause. Can anyone let me know if they can't access the chat function?
Drew, can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
What's Cassie's phone number? Because I've only got you on screen. In order to get the other thing, I've got to go somewhere else. So I've got a phone by my side. So what's the number to ring if there's a problem?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. Can Matthew said he'll send it to you?
Yeah, if it's on the bottom, it might turn up. But at the moment, I'm just looking at you on the screen, and that's all there is on the screen.
Yeah.
Perhaps, Peter, if you were told the last 4 digits, you do know the rest.
Oh,
yeah.
Seriously.
770. Yeah. All right.
No. I tried.
Okay, I'll get back to you in a second with that one, Peter.
Okay.
Yeah. Next thing to note is all the votes tonight will be recorded votes apart from for the minutes. So we'll do is for each item we'll stop and the clerk will take a roll call. And to stop eye strain, I'll also pause a few times during the meeting and we'll have a break so that the evening can run a bit more smoothly. As we begin now, can I please ask the clerk to move through a roll call of members? And when you answer, can you say whether you're present and also if you have any declaration of interest for an item? Thank you, Kathy, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Members, as I read your name, please turn on your microphone and camera and state if you're present and if you do or do not have an interest in an agenda item. After you have spoken, please switch off your microphone and camera. I've received apologies from Councillor Jill Whitehead, and if I do not hear from any other member, I'll return to them at the end of the roll call. So, Councillor Eric Allen.
Present and no declaration of interest.
Councillor Richard Clare.
Present, no interest to declare.
Councillor Tim Foster.
Present, no interest to declare.
Councillor Vincent Gallagher.
Present, no interest to declare.
Councillor Peter Geringer.
Present and no interest to declare.
Councillor Amy Haldane.
Present, nothing to declare with the microphone on.
Councillor Tony Shields.
Present, no pecuniary interest to declare.
I've received apologies from Councillor Jill Whitehead, with Councillor Chris Williams attending as a substitute.
Present and no interest to declare.
Councillor Kevin Burke.
I'm present and no interest to declare.
And Councillor Drew Heffernan.
I'm present and have no interest to declare.
Thank you, councillors. I'll pass back to the chair.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. The next item on the agenda is minutes. Because the minutes were written after the original papers were circulated, you'll find them under any urgent business on your agenda pack. But we'll do them now so we can get them out of the way. Can we approve the minutes from the last meeting? So if you on the chat functions you can say yes or wave, and then we can. And if you have any objections, you can raise them in the chat function as well. I'll just give a few seconds for that. Cool. Okay, right, I'll take those as approved. Thank you. Next item is declarations of interest, but we've gone through that as part of the roll call. And we'll now move on to the planning applications. What will happen tonight is that I'll ask officers to give a brief presentation on each application, and then officers will display some slides on screen and will talk us through them. And then I'll ask if any members have questions for the officers. So please don't ask any questions in the middle of the presentation. We'll then also have some speakers on some of the items, so from members of the public and councillors, and also you'll have received some written statements for some of the items, and we'll address those as we come to them. The first item tonight is on the land at the rear of 33 Langley Avenue, and this item was deferred from last time where I wasn't present. So what I'm going to do for this item is pass the chair over to Kevin Burke. If any other members are here tonight that weren't there then, you can't take part in this either. So if you can turn off your microphone, turn off your video, and make yourself a cup of coffee. Keep an eye on the stream so you know when to come back in. But for now, I'll just pass over to Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Heffernan. As you just said, this was an application deferred on the 4th of March for committee members present at this meeting are the only ones who can participate and vote. It was deferred to allow planning officers to further assess the previous planning history of the area, particularly around flooding and drainage. Therefore, this should be the only issue debated at this meeting. I'm now going to ask the officers to present a short presentation around the flooding and drainage issues only. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Gavin Chinley, Planning Manager at Sutton Council. I'll take you through the presentation in a moment. I'll just put the presentation on the screen. So item 4 relates to previously a deferred application on the 4th of March 2020 at the rear of Langley Avenue for a detached a dwelling. Members agreed that the proposed development regarding land use, design, transport, sustainability, trees, biodiversity and amenity were considered to be acceptable. The application was deferred in order to review the planning history of the previously constructed houses on Covey Road regarding flooding and drainage concerns. These are the only matters to be considered as part of the update report. Sections 1.1 to 1.6 of the update report provides details of planning permissions between 2002 and 2018. In total, 5 planning applications have been approved, northwest to southwest of Covey Road, as shown on this OS map. Various applications have been approved via the Planning Inspectorate or the Council. In some cases, conditions have been attached regarding drainage measures within the development. The Building Control Department at Sutton have confirmed that submitted building regulation approvals went through approved inspectors. Furthermore, there is no means by which the Council can illegally obtain information from an approved inspector. However, it should be noted that Building Control have confirmed there are no drains sewers in Covey Road, and it is assumed that they are connected to main drains. It's important to understand that there are no records of underground aquifers or rivers. Thames Water have confirmed between 2015 and 2020, a total of 8 properties constructed have applied and obtained appropriate approval to connect into foul and surface sewers located in Langley Avenue. It should be noted that Thames Water have been contacted regarding historic flooding complaints in the area, and have confirmed that 2 complaints were received between 2002 and 2019. Thames Water have confirmed to connect to the main sewer system, an application is required once planning permission has been granted. This process takes 21 days and must comply with technical guidance as set out by Thames Water. This provides necessary reassurance to neighbouring occupiers that drainage and flooding issues will be effectively managed. Further to this, the Council's flood drainage officer has confirmed that they support the application. Only 1 complaint has been received to date. Following the deferral of the planning application, the Council sent out letters on the 28th of April and 15th of May to understand the drainage and flooding matters arising from residents. A mixed response was received from local residents in relation to surface water flooding. It would appear in many instances due to prolonged rainfall, surface water flooding was present. Some comments have arisen due to construction of houses along Covey Road. Surface water flooding has become more prominent. Further to this, some residents have implemented flood risk mitigation to reduce surface water flooding. Over the next few slides, I must take you through some pictures which have been received from local residents. The first picture on the screen shows a property at 25 Langley Avenue, which shows pictures outlining the effect of prolonged rainfall on the rear of the patio. A further picture of the rear garden when works are being undertaken. Rainfall just sits on the clay soil and is unable to drain through the actual surface of the actual clay. This is another property on 31 Langley Avenue, which shows surface water flooding in the rear garden. And this is 57 Langley Avenue, another rear garden suffering of prolonged rainfall in the local area. This is another property on Burnham Drive. As you can see, these gardens have had prolonged rainfall, which has caused surface water flooding to actually occur. 64A Langley Avenue. This is a property which is on the opposite side of Langley Avenue, and it's away from the properties on Covey Road. And as you can see, even though these properties are not near these properties on Covey Road, they are more susceptible. They are more prone to rainfall and also surface water flooding in the local area. In conclusion, Having regard to all the matters outlined within the update report and presentation this evening, surface water flooding has been an issue in the local area prior to the construction of houses on Covey Road. There is not substantive links between the properties being erected on Covey Road and reported surface water flooding. Finally, officers have explored all avenues and conclude, due to the prolonged rainfall within the local area, London clay soil are more susceptible to waterlogging in periods of prolonged rainfall. On this basis, given the further information and further evidence provided, plan permission should be granted subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shields, I see on the chat, you said you can't see the pictures. Has that changed?
No, it hasn't changed. I can't see a thing. All I can see is a red G pulsating with Gavin's speech. That
Okay, well,
it.
I mean, it was basically pictures of flooded gardens. I mean, I don't know whether you feel that's you can get sufficient information without having seen the pictures or not.
I imagine they are the same pictures we saw at the last meeting.
I think there's some new ones, but it's basically back gardens flooded. So I think if you can picture that, you've got the evidence there.
As we have various officers tuning into this, and I have an iPad, can I ask them for some information about how I would gain pictures? Because we've got a long meeting tonight, and this is not a good start.
Hello, Chair. Sorry, it's Matthew Stickley, Committee Services Team Leader. Hello. I'll get the pictures sent around to members in a moment. I think it's probably just to do with individuals' screen layouts, but we'll get them sent around shortly, okay?
Okay, not sure how I'll receive it, but we'll see how we go.
Via email, yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll take questions now regarding the presentation. I'll ask members if they wish to ask a question on points of clarification of any of the statements regarding the flooding and drainage. If they ask the appropriate officer to, I'll then ask the appropriate officer to respond. So basically, it's only on this section that we're interested in the flooding report. Once the questions have been answered, we'll move on to the debate. So are there any questions? So looking at the chat at the moment, I have Councillor Shields. So if you want to ask your question, Councillor Shields.
Yes, thank you. I can hear you loud and clear. That's a good thing. On the assessment, which is page 3.1.10, sorry, 1.10, Gavin alluded to, he described the process that takes 21 days from the receipt of an application for mains drainage, and we go on to some fairly hefty amount of words to decide whether Thames Water can basically agree that we can continue. Can we just be sure? Is that for surface water, or is it just for foul, or what we might call sewer water?
Councillor Shields, this is for both. This is for both surface water and sewer connections.
So, just to be sure, then, Thames Water will take an ownership of water runoff as part of their assessment.
Yeah, so as part of the actual process, they get to a certain stage within the actual construction phase of the development, and they can't go past a certain stage to get it connected to the main sewer system. So what happens is there'll be an inspection from Thames Water. So once an application is submitted to Thames Water, someone will come down on site and do an inspection to make sure everything's above board. And then if they say the connection is fine and they've actually gone ahead and implemented the correct equipment underground, they can carry on with the construction work of the scheme.
So just to be sure, would this be potentially include some form of underwater tank, which would, because obviously the Thames Water do not, as far as I know, accept foul and sewage water and surface water runoff into their system. They only accept sewage into their system. But you're now telling me they accept surface water as well, subject to the right system.
I mean, through since the deferral of the application at Planning Committee, officers have basically gone to Thames Water extensively throughout the whole process. And yes, they do accept that. And also they've actually confirmed that they have no objection to the amount of surface runoff and sewer runoff into the main system. That's correct, yes.
Thank you for your confirmation. No further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Shields. So we then have Councillor Foster, followed by Councillor Haldane. Just before I come to you, Councillor Foster, Councillor Garinger, you said I was not present. I was not present. Do you mean you were not present at the first meeting, or were you present on the 4th of March?
I was present at the offer. This, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The
Sorry.
one not present was to the last meeting. I wasn't there at the last one.
Got you. Okay. Sorry, that's my mistake. So I'll go into Councillor Foster, and then it'll be Councillor Haldane.
But I still want to ask a question.
Yes, I'll come to you later.
Okay.
I've got 4 people at the moment, so
Yeah,
Councillor Foster first.
Okay.
Thank you.
My question is very simple. It's on page 2.1.7, where you say the council's building control team has confirmed that all these developments submitted building regulation approvals through approved inspectors. So there is no record of whether the water management details above were actually implemented, and there's no means by which the council can legally obtain that information. So we can set conditions and we're unable to check it. I don't quite understand the rationale.
We've got an officer can answer that. I think if that's the case, I'm not sure I understand the rationale. Perhaps there isn't one, but can an officer answer that?
Chair, I think we need to separate out building control from planning enforcement here. You see in the preceding paragraphs, we've had the written confirmation that sustainable and urban drainage schemes have been passed by the council, and we've had confirmation that they've been implemented. So we have that confirmation from on the planning side. What we're saying is that the council's building control team didn't have the remit to go out and check the building regs on that. So there hasn't been that double checking, if you like. In this instance, though, what my colleague has said is that there is an approval process in place which will run parallel with this planning application should members be minded to grant tonight. The development won't proceed past the kind of groundwork stage and unless and until Thames Water is satisfied that the drainage scheme is something that meets their particular test of criteria. And only that would be applicable once the applicant has put in details for approval for sustainable urban drainage, and they'll first of all have to consider all the other elements in the drainage hierarchy before they consider, or Thames Water are prepared to consider discharge to the surface water and combined sewer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Webber. So I now move to Councillor Haldane.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your presentation, Gavin. I remember seeing the pictures last time and hearing from residents who were experiencing really bad flooding. We're not suggesting that the flooding isn't apparent, but more that this building, if it was to be granted, the application was to be granted, and it were to be built, wouldn't exacerbate these problems. So what conditions, if any, would you suggest we attach to permission in order to give those residents experiencing flooding peace of mind that this build won't make this situation any worse?
I think Councillor Haldane answered your question in terms of your first point. I mean, as I said to Councillor Shields, we've explored all avenues of Thames Water, and they've basically confirmed that this development wouldn't exacerbate the current surface runoff into the sewer system. Your second point in regards to the conditions on the actual application, which was presented to members on the 4th of March, there were conditions attached to the application. I think it was conditions, sorry, if I just go to the report a minute, conditions conditions 8 and basically condition 10 as well need to be submitted as part of the urban drainage for the application. So they need to adhere to those conditions prior to the commencement of development. So that would protect any future flooding in the local area.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Garinger and then Councillor Allen. Councillor Garinger, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
That's great. Well, I've got 2 or 3 points to make. On the conclusion on page 4, it sort of basically says that it's basically the London clay, which is susceptible to waterlogging, that's causing the problem. But I have spoken to an expert about the situation, and they say, well, it's only a problem if it hasn't been well drained. And so if you've got London clay and there's no drainage, that is a problem. If it's London clay and there has been drainage, then it shouldn't be so bad. So first of all, I'd like to know, has there been drainage on the London clay that we're talking about in this area? That's question 1, please. The second one is that you send a letter out to residents dated the 15th of May, asking them for their experiences about flooding, and yet the minutes were produced on the 22nd. With still 5 days to go for people to respond. So how many additional responses have there been to the letter going out from when the agenda was published on the 22nd?
Chair, can Andy Webber, head of planning?
The third one.
Councillor Garinger, can I stop you there? Can we answer those first 2 and we'll come back to your third one, please?
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, Councillor Andy Webber, head of planning, and I didn't mean to cut across you there. I thought you finished. I do apologise.
No problem.
If I answer the first question, my colleagues can pick up the second question. What my colleague introduced in those photographs, I think, was quite revealing in a way, because he showed pictures and diagrams from gardens in Langley Avenue. I think number 25 was one of the pictures you saw, and because it's been said that there's a cause and effect from new development in Covey Road making worse the flooding, the back of 25 doesn't have a new property behind it at present, yet the garden is still showing as having excess surface water during excess rains. And similarly, my colleague also showed you a property on the kind of northeast side of Langley Avenue, not backing onto Covey Avenue, and similarly having very significant surface water issues. This is recognised that London clay is a problem in terms of its lack of permeability. I think it's fair to say that it's not conclusive at all that developments in Covey Road have been a contributory factor in surface water flooding. I think that's something which I don't think there's a direct link there. And besides which, the majority of those properties in Covey Road do have existing connections to Thames Water, again, as my colleague confirmed in presentation. And I'll let my colleague continue with the rest of the answer, I think.
Yes, Councillor Goringer, in terms of your second point, is my microphone this one? In terms of your second point, in terms of the consultation, that had actually expired prior to the committee meeting. And looking at the calendar, we gave until Friday, the 15th of May, to give comments on the application. So there's been no further comments received. And as you can see from the update report, there were further comments received, and they've been put onto the addendum report, and that is all we've received to date.
So are you saying, because a letter here that went out says, can you please send any details of this by Wednesday the 27th of May? So all I'm asking is, have there been any? You've got certain items here on page 4, but have there been any since then? Because the agenda was published on the 22nd, but people had up to the 27th to send them in.
Yeah, so as I said to you, there's been a addendum report attached, and that is all the updated letters which have been received as part of this application. And since then, there's been no further correspondence on this matter.
Right. My third point, if I may, Chairman, is that I spoke to the ward councillor about the matter of Burnham Drive. Now, you said that you've consulted two people on the other side of the road at Burnham, but according to the ward councillor, there have been loads of other properties nearby that have had flooding problems, but of course you've only written to 2 of them, so you haven't had the full picture from them. That's all, and you should have done.
I think, in terms of that question, councillor, I think yes, we've undertaken a very extensive consultation in terms of providing further consultation letters to understand the response from residents in regards to flooding. And I wrote to the ward councillor on that basis that given that these properties are in close proximity to the properties on Covey Road, they were more prone to being impacted by those properties. As such, they were consulted, and I explained that given that 2 of the properties on Burnham Drive were consulted as part of the planning application, this is why they were included in that latest raft of letters which were sent out.
Gavin, I have a copy of the letter that you sent, and you just said, furthermore, a couple of properties in Burnham Drive. A couple means 1 or 2, rather than the whole load that the councillor reckons has been told that there have been floodings there. So a couple isn't a whole load, and you should have consulted more in Burnham, because that's just the other side of the road.
Okay, so I think that's a point for the debate, Councillor Garinger, which you may want to make there. I'd like to move on to Councillor Allen, who wishes to ask a question. That's the last person I can see needs to ask a question. So if anybody else wants to ask a question after this, please put it on the chat. Councillor Allen, please ask your question.
Good evening, Gavin. I'm just a bit confused between the fact that we're looking here at planning permission, but then this will be also subject to building control. Having built extensions in Sutton and having to build extensive rainwater runoff off soakaways, I find it rather strange that what you're now saying is that Thames Water will allow this rainwater runoff to go straight into the main sewers. So on the basis that that is going to be agreed, can we have confirmation exactly from Thames Water that this will be the case, and if there is any comeback later on in relation to flooding of subsequent and relating properties, that this will then be down to either Sutton Council or Thames Water for having allowed this to happen? Thank you.
Chair, it's Andy Webber, Head of Plan. Can I come in on this? I think we set out quite clearly, Councillor Allen, that there is a parallel consenting process. Thames Water have been, I think, incredibly helpful in providing us with information about historic connections in Covey Road to the systems in Langley Avenue. It's not a foregone conclusion, Councillor, that Thames Water will approve the drainage scheme, because it has to be designed to their exacting standards and their criteria. So that is something that would have to happen. If permission were granted, the developer would have, the applicant would have to put in details of the sustainable urban drainage scheme that they are proposing, having, as I said, first considered the drainage hierarchy. The connection is, you know, frankly, a connection of last resort, if you like. It's the last option available. So they will have to consider other options, but they are limited by the fact that things like infiltration techniques, because it's on London clay, are not going to be possible. So we're exploring with Thames Water the possibility of them agreeing another connection. They don't feel there's any issue with their current capacity, but it is all down to the design. There's a parallel consenting process. Now, it may well be, Councillor, that of course we can't control the competition we get from the private sector and the approved inspectors on building regulations. But I'm quite happy, because I manage building control for Sutton, to have a conversation with the applicant to ask if he will make sure that the building regulations are submitted to Sutton, so we can give perhaps a little bit more confidence. I can't guarantee that, Councillor, but I can certainly have that conversation with the applicant. But I am fairly confident that we have adequate safeguards in place with the conditions that are put forward, but also the fact that Thames Water, I think, are pretty comfortable with a connection. That's what they're telling us. But nevertheless, they still have to go through this parallel consenting scheme with Thames Water. And I take your points about liability. I can't really speak for Thames Water in that regard, only to confirm what we've been told by Thames Water since we were asked to go away and have another look at this since the 4th of March.
Okay, well, I am concerned about the neighbours and the fact that if we do have even more flooding in that area due to the fact we've allowed another development, that they should have some comeback either against Thames Water for allowing it or against Sutton Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions.
Oh, I do.
Did you put it on the chat?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, Councillor Garanger, sorry, I've lost the chat function, so I might have lost your question.
Don't worry. I'm as concerned about the water flooding situation as the residents are. Are you saying that with your planning conditions, there will be no flooding of existing buildings because of this development? And then who will be implementing conditions 10 and 11, and who will ensure that they are implemented and kept to? These are the conditions.
I think, Councillor Goringer, we've got our flood risk officer on the line who can answer that question for you and give you some assurances in terms of the conditions which have been imposed as part of the planning application.
Yeah, thank you, Gavin. Evening, councillors. So Derek Regan, and I'm the flood risk officer for Sutton Council. So to take your first question, Councillor Geringer, what the proposed condition is stating, and this condition is in line with policy, what policy says is that because this site is a green field in its current form, post-development, it should behave as a green field. And that includes, that should include some type of suds or attenuation on site. So essentially, all of the surface water that hits that site will remain on site and be managed on site. And if it does eventually end up in the Thames water sewer system, it will be released at a controlled rate from the site into the sewer system. And the conditions in terms of discharging them, they will more than likely come to myself, conditions 10 and 11. So it will be myself as the flood risk officer to review submitted details and ensure it's in line with condition and in turn in line with policy.
Can I make a further point while I'm on?
If it's a point, Councillor Garanger, can we make it in the debate, or is it a question?
I think it could be a question.
Well, let's make sure it is a question. If it's a point that you want to make a question, if you've got a question, please ask it.
Will you be ensuring that the property and maybe other properties have weeping willows planted? Apparently, they take up the water very well, and that might help some of the flooding problems if you have some of those trees planted to take up the water.
Councillor Goringer, Andy Webber, Head of Planning. We have a condition on the planning application about soft landscaping. I don't think we can be that prescriptive in terms of what species are planted, but I do understand the point made. But certainly, you know, a degree of planting, I'm sure, is going to be beneficial in terms of the site conditions. So there's a landscaping condition, so we'll pick that up in that separate landscaping condition.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I can't see anybody else wanted to ask a question. We'll move to debate. Would anybody like to open the debate? Okay, Councillor Haldane was first, so if you'd like to make a point, and then Councillor Shields.
Thank you, Chair. I think we were all agreed last time round that if this application had come to us and there had been no previous development in Covey Road to the back of Langley, that we wouldn't perhaps think that it was such a good idea. But given that all of the building that's taken place up until this point, I don't think it would be prudent for us to refuse this application, and I'm satisfied that the flooding issues have been addressed, and that if we grant this application and Thames Water do agree, then we'll have done all our due diligence, and that we should therefore be granting planning permission this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Haldane. Councillor Shields, and then Councillor Gallagher.
I think Councillor Haldane is actually on the right track here, in that sufficient works has been carried out. I think we all could agree the first application was perhaps a little light on detail. We've all had a much bigger time to pay attention to the flooding issues. I'm very interested in the embracing indemnity, that effectively that is the water authority, Thames Water, and that there was be an inspection and a proper methodology, which I don't believe was offered, quite frankly, last time at the last committee meeting. Certainly not in simple terms, but I think we have a bit of an insurance policy here, and I think by that the residents and the local ward councillor, who's been very busy on this, we have an undertaking that things will not get worse, and I think that's possibly why I agree with Councillor Haldane, and we should move forward, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shields. Councillor Gallagher.
Hi, can you all hear me? You can hear me?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
No, I agree with what's been said already. The Thames Water obviously spent some time with us trying to see if this can be solved. As Councillor Shields said, the buildings that have gone up already have gone up. They have been connected. I kind of feel that this is another property that will be connected in the same way, and the Thames Water is going to, we know on this particular occasion, going to look at it very, very carefully. So I think with the work that's being done, I kind of feel that we need to go ahead with it and allow for the fact that Thames Water is a kind of backstop to control the problem that we've been talking about previously.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. I'd just like to add that I agree with all three people who contributed to the debate so far. I don't think we would have grounds to refuse this, and there's obviously a history of flooding, mainly due to with the type of land there, which is London clay. So I certainly would be supporting the officer's recommendation to approve. And Councillor Shields would like to make a comment, then I'll come to Councillor Garinger.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, the comment is that we have a heck of a lot more information than we did last time. A lot of work has gone into this. We have, if you like, an indemnity for the assurance of residents with the flooding issues. And of course, we have got the opportunity to review this if Thames Water actually can't agree a system. We have a kind of an insurance policy for residents, which I think is extremely important. And of course, if we go to appeal, we may not have these safeguarding effects. The appeal inspector may turn, if we turn it down in the face of a sustainable drainage system, and the inspector says, actually, do you know what, I think I'll just agree it anyway, and not put that stipulation in, which is the only safeguard residents have got, I think we could be helping the flooding situation by making even more flooding. So I think keeping it brief, we should take the insurance policy, as it were, and move forward, and perhaps even move forward to the vote, Chair.
Yeah, I see that Mr. Webber would like to say something before we go to the vote, so I'll come to him first, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Garinger.
Thank you.
Chair, it would be remiss of me if I didn't draw members' attention. In the addendum report, there is reference in the very last paragraph of the addendum report to representation we received, and I think you all were received this representation from the owner-occupier of 31 Langley Avenue to all councillors prior to the committee that was rescheduled. I think it was towards the end of May this was written. And I'm drawing your attention to paragraph 3. I don't know if you all have it there, but I need to just bring this to your attention that the if members are minded to approve the application, the resident requests that the start date for the development is deferred because the resident falls within one of the extremely vulnerable groups at risk from the effects of COVID-19. And is very concerned the development would impact on their enjoyment of their garden. And I think it's important that you're just aware of that. As far as the officer advice is concerned on this, and we have somebody from legal on the call here, I'm not sure this is something that we can insist on for the developer to defer the commencement. But as you can tell, there are an awful lot of pre-commencement conditions, if members are minded to approve, that the applicant would need to clear first, and you have that separate consenting process with Thames Water as well. So I think it's going to be a bit of time before the development starts. But obviously, the current pandemic, we really don't know how long these current conditions will go on for. So I need to bring this to your attention. We don't think there's a basis in planning law to ask the applicant to defer the start of the work. But I think that's probably something that I think the applicant probably needs to have a discussion with the resident about and try to come to some sort of reasonable agreement outside the remit of the planning application. Chair, that's all I wanted to do, to bring members' attention to that request from the resident at 31 Langley Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Webber. Is that something we can negotiate with the applicant on? I mean, you say we can't make a condition. I understand that, but would planning officers be willing to try and negotiate around that?
Chair, I'm more than happy to have make contact with the applicants. We've had quite a few conversations. It's fair to say. They are not property developers. They are a family who have invested a lot in developing this site as a home to live in. So there's obviously a time imperative from their perspective. But I think, Chair, through you, I'm quite happy to take this away and try and mediate on this matter. But the advice we've had, certainly from legal, is that we can't insist that the applicant defers this. So I think other means of discussion and negotiation are probably going to be appropriate instead.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come back to Councillor Garinger, who wished to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. One point I'd like to have clarification on from Andy Webber. It was what this letter with the 5 points in. It says point 19, Thames Water confirmed that between 2015 and 2020, a total of 8 properties constructed along Covey Road have applied and obtained appropriate approval to connect to the foul and surface water sewers located in Langley Avenue. It goes on to say this is rather interesting, as there are 12 houses in the new development. I don't know whether you can say anything about that.
So I'm not sure what your question is, Councillor Garinger.
Well, I was wondering why 8 properties and not the 12? Because 8 properties have applied and obtained appropriate approval to connect to the foul and surface water sewers located in Langley Avenue. It goes on to say this is rather interesting, as there are 12 houses in the new development. So there appear to be 4 houses that are not connected to the foul and surface water sewers.
Yeah, Councillor, I can't confirm by what means they've managed surface water runoff, and I know there's something about the historic nature of how the developments in Covey Road have come forward, but that's the only information we've been able to get from Thames Water when they've checked their records. I mean, I think the important thing to note is that what is being suggested here and being proposed with a consenting process from Thames Water is not unprecedented. It's, there have been a number of other examples which have been carried out to the satisfaction of Thames Water, and there's no reason why this development couldn't either.
Yeah, if I can go on to say, as far as the debate is concerned, I've listened to everything that's been said. I did speak to a friend of mine who is an expert on this, and I spoke about the conditions 10 and 11 and was told that these two conditions are pretty good ones. And on that basis, if those conditions are kept to, I'd be minded to approve. But as long as they were kept to, because I wouldn't like to see these conditions having been put in place and then not obeyed, and then flooding starts again, and what do we do about it then? But as things stand at the moment, I'll probably go along with this.
Excellent. Right. So, Councillor Haldane, you made a couple of points on the chat. Did you want to come in, or are you happy to go to the vote?
Happy to go to the vote. I'll just, for transparency, read out what I wrote in the chat, which is that given the situation the applicant is in, as well as the current situation we all find ourselves in, and the fact that there is no reason in planning law to refuse, could we please ensure that this happens as quickly as possible, but obviously, as safely as possible with regards to the flooding? I'd just like to say that for the record.
Okay, and you're happy for officers that Mr. Webber said they will do their best to negotiate and to mitigate, and you're happy with that offer, I take it? Yeah,
and I think we heard more about it last time, when in fact we didn't really hear anything about it this time really, but these people are going to be neighbours if this application is granted and the house is built, so any mediation and negotiation to make sure that there is as much neighbourliness as is possible given the situation, and I recognise it will be difficult, but these people need a home to live in, and there's no reason in planning law to refuse them, and I hope that they can enjoy their house once it's built, and also get on with their neighbours as well.
Yeah, here. So if that's the final comment, I would like to move to the vote. So can I ask the clerk to please move to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. Members, as I read your name, please turn on your mic and camera and state if you're voting for, against or abstain on the recommendation. Councillor Eric Allen.
I will vote for the application, but it's always subject to the fact that Thames Water will take the rainwater off the site.
Thank you. Councillor Tim Foster.
I vote for the application.
Councillor Vincent Gallagher.
For.
Councillor Peter Geringer.
I'm voting for, on the basis that the conditions are kept to 100%.
Councillor Amy Haldane.
For.
Councillor Tony Shields.
Similar to Councillor Geringer, providing the conditions are met, I am voting for.
Councillor Chris Williams.
For.
Councillor Kevin Burke.
For.
Thank you, councillors. That means there are 4 votes for, no votes against and no abstentions. I'll pass back to the chair.
Thank you. That means planning permission for this application is granted. And I'm now going to pass the chair back to Councillor Heffernan.
Thank you, Councillor Beck, and thank you to everyone for the last item. Can I just double check that the people who left the meeting are now back in? So I think that's Councillor Clare. You can let us know in the chat. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so what I want to do now is move on to agenda item 8, which is a relatively minor application, and it's come before us because it's a application from a member of staff at the council. Now, unless there are any objections, I don't think we need a full presentation on this, but
agreed.
Cool. But if you do, are there anybody who have any questions for officers on that item?
Sorry, did you ask it was number 4?
This is item number 8, so page 61 to 70 in the original.
Oh yes, so beg your pardon. Yes, I agree with Councillor Garia.
Cool. Thank you. Brilliant. So I can't see any questions from councillors, so that means we can either move into debate or straight to the vote. Is there anyone who wants to say anything? Okay. Kathy, can we move to the roll call on item 8, please, which is Gander Green Lane?
Sorry, again, as I read your name, could you put on your microphone and camera and state if you're voting for, against or abstain? Councillor Eric Allen.
For.
Councillor Richard Clare.
For.
Councillor Tim Foster.
For.
Councillor Vincent Gallagher.
For.
Councillor Peter Geringer.
For.
Councillor Amy Haldane.
For.
Councillor Tony Shields.
For.
Councillor Chris Williams. Sorry. Councillor Chris Williams.
For.
For. Councillor Kevin Burke.
I'm for.
Councillor Drew Heffernan.
For.
That's 10 votes for, no votes against, and no abstentions.
Right, thank you. So item 8 is carried. Okay, thank you. We'll now go back to the right order and go to item number 5. And this is an application for Wallington Public Hall on Stafford Road. And can I ask the officer, Katie, to present the presentation for item number 5, please?
Thank you, Chair. Katie Johnson, Deputy Planning Manager. Firstly, following on from the cancellation of committee last week, I'd like to amend the date in the recommendation box of the committee report to the 30th of June 2020. The application site was formerly occupied by Wallington Public Hall. The hall has now been demolished in connection with planning permission granted in 2018 for the erection of a Part 3, Part 4 storey buildings comprising of 31 flats. This is just a photo from Stafford Road. This is a photograph of the rear of the site from the public car park. Planning Commission is sought to amend the drawing number condition, which is number 1, and condition 28, which restricts some windows to be obscure glazed and fixed shut. The proposal also includes some additional window, brise soleil, and a variation to allow information for condition 8, which is the GLA overheating condition, to be submitted at a later date. All the changes are listed in paragraph 2.2 of the committee report. However, I'll just run through some of the drawings. So these windows here in the north elevation of the building at the rear are to have the fixing shut removed, but they will remain obscure glazed. The windows at the top along here will have the fixing shut and the obscure glazing removed. And this window at the bottom here, which serves a bathroom, is a new window. In the east elevation, which faces Onslow Gardens, there's 3 new windows here. The ground floor serves a bathroom, the 2 upper floors serve landings. These windows will no longer be fixed shut or have any obscure glazing. And here, these windows are to be slightly enlarged in size. The majority of the windows serve bathrooms and living rooms, bedrooms, bathrooms and living rooms. And on this elevation, though it's quite difficult to see, the only change really is a brise soleil added to the upper floors. The scale, mass and bulk of the development remains as approved and is not considered that the proposed window alterations and the addition of new windows would result in significant loss of amenity to neighbouring residential properties. For these reasons and those outlined in the committee report, it is recommended that planning permission be granted subject to conditions in the draft decision notice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Katie. Do any councillors have questions on this? If you could let me know on the chat, and I'll come to you in the order in which you appear. Okay, so we don't seem to have any questions. We didn't have any written statements submitted for this item, and we don't have any registered speakers. So I'm going to suggest we move into debate straight away, unless we've got any more questions. So if anyone wants to type in debate and get us started. If I can't see anything in the next 10-15 seconds, we'll just move to the vote. Okay, we'll move to vote. Kathy, can you do a roll call of members, please, on item 5?
Firstly, could I ask that somebody propose and second the amendment to the motion that Katie asked for, that the completion date is altered to the 30th of June, I think Katie said?
Okay. Am I going to propose that, or Kevin?
I'm happy to propose it if you want, Councillor Burke.
And somebody to second it?
I'm happy to second it, but if a member of the opposition wants to second it, that's fine.
I'm happy to second it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so again, as I read your name, if you could say for, against, or abstain. Councillor Eric Allen.
For.
Councillor Richard Clare.
For.
Councillor Tim Foster.
For.
Councillor Vincent Gallagher.
For.
Councillor Peter Geringer.
For.
Councillor Amy Haldane.
For.
Councillor Tony Shearer.
I'm for.
Councillor Chris Williams.
For.
Councillor Kevin Burke.
I'm for.
Councillor Drew Heffernan.
For.
That's 10 votes for, no votes against, and no abstentions.
Okay, thank you. So item 5 is carried. We'll now move on to item 6, which is an application at Overton Park and Overton Road. Can I ask the officer to present, please? I think that's Jody.
Yes, Chair. Jody Williams, Deputy Planning Manager. I'm hoping you can now see my screen.
I can see it, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Chair, agenda item 6 relates to Overton Park in Overton Road in Sutton. The application is before you as the application has received more than 10 letters of representation contrary to the officer's recommendation, and the application has been made and submitted by the London Borough of Sutton. The application seeks permission to install two... Sorry, my slides won't move now. Sorry, Chair. There you go. Application seeks to install two... Now it's going to go flicking through. Sorry, Chair. Okay. Chair, the application seeks permission to install two artificial wickets located centrally within the park to the western element. here and here, one to the north, one to the south, as well as the erection of ball stop fencing in specific locations. There's 5 locations within the park, and they're varying heights. Fence A, which is located to the northern end of the park adjacent to the car park, would be 1.2 metres in height. Fence B would be located, so just as it comes along. So this was fence A, the top elevation on the so fence A, again, sorry, Chair, fence A located in this location and shown in the top drawing would be 1.2 metres in height. Fence B, which is the bottom elevation, would be 3.5 metres in height, adjacent to the western boundary of the park and to the rear of properties fronting onto Holland Avenue. This photo shows the location of proposed fence A adjacent to the car park element to the north. And this photo looks towards Holland Avenue, where the fence would be located in approximately this location. Fence C would be located adjacent to the properties of fronting Holland Avenue to the southern end of the western boundary and would be 2 metres in height. Fence D, located in this location and the bottom elevation, would be located adjacent to the northern end, the southern end and the eastern boundary of this part of the park, adjacent to the properties fronting onto Courtney Avenue. This photo shows the proposed location of fence C in this location, with the properties of Holland Avenue visible. And this photo shows the proposed location of fence D with the rear elevations of properties fronting Courtney Avenue visible. Fence E, located in this location, would be 3.5 metres in height, located within the park to the south of the pavilion and nursery, adjacent to the footpath running through. And this photo shows the proposed location of fence E adjacent to the pathway within the park. Chair, this photo shows an example of the proposed fencing design and appearance, and a condition is included to require further details to be submitted for approval should permission be granted tonight. It's important to emphasise that this application does not result in a change of use of the park, as cricket is already a sport that can be played within the park alongside all other sports, and the use of the park by the public will continue. The proposal would enhance the existing sporting facilities available for the park users. An independent risk assessment has been carried out to review the potential distance and trajectory of cricket balls when hit from the proposed artificial wickets. This has informed the proposed location and heights of the ball stop fencing. The fencing is considered to be suitable finish and colour for the location and will have an element of transparency, which together with the separate locations of the 5 sections will ensure the visual openness of the park is maintained, whilst providing a level of protection for the other park users and neighbouring residential properties. Whilst fence B will be a maximum of 3.5 metres high, due to the distance from the Holland Avenue properties, the fencing will not result in any unreasonable impact on outlook, privacy or daylight currently enjoyed by these occupants. The remaining sections are 2 metres in height or lower and similar in height to the existing boundary fencing, and therefore not considered to result in an adverse impact to adjoining occupiers. In addition, it's not considered the proposal would adversely impact on any significant trees within the park or result in any additional pressure on on-street parking or highway safety. Chair, for these reasons, it's considered the proposal is acceptable and it's recommended that the application be approved subject to the suggested conditions.
Thank you. Can you indicate in the chat function if you've got any questions? Councillor Burke, you're in first if you want to give your question to officers.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious as to why the fences are where they are, and I think I've worked it out, but I'm one of the officers confirm, because they're only about, in old money, 4 foot high, I think 1.2 metres. Is that because there's a trim track runs around there, and are these protecting the trim track bits where people might be using them for exercise? Because I can't see they're doing much for the houses. Sorry, that's my question. What are the fences doing?
Sorry, no, just trying to. Jodie Williams, Deputy Planning Manager. The fences have been informed by the risk assessment, which was carried out independently. I believe the location of the fences is where the strongest hits will be from the wicket. So I think they're at directly sort of parallel to the wicket where that's the strongest hit. So I think the two either side of the wickets, fence B, C, D, and E, are to protect the square strikes, and I think the smaller fence to the north is to protect the car park from straight shots, and I think that's why the fencing is in the location it is in and the heights it is in. It's been led by the safety audit conducted independently.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Galligan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the fencing, what is it made out of? It looks sort of like a metal fencing, which obviously doesn't look that nice. So yeah, can it be made, or is it made out of something that looks a little bit better than just metal fencing? The dog leg, or the one with the dog leg on it, which is what, 3.5, I presume that is to try and protect the play area when children manage to get the grass cut and get back in there. Would that be adequate? Is it, you know, I presume, I mean, I'm not a cricket person, to be honest with you, but I presume that the cricket ball really can go anywhere. So I don't know if that sort of does the whole job there. The one down by the cars, again, I would imagine that a good cricketer could go around that and hit one of the cars. The other thing, when I was round there the other day, loads of people were out sunbathing, picnicking with children. How is it going to work that sort of suddenly cricketers are going to come in and start hitting a hard ball around if there's other people there that want to do something else?
Thank you, Councillor. Jodie, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, the fence is made from, I've just had it in front of me now. I think it's galvanised coated steel, and obviously it needs to be of a solid structure to stop the balls as they are hit towards it. As I said, the location of the fencing and the heights is determined by the independent risk assessment, and obviously the ball can go, as you say, anywhere, but obviously the majority of the strongest shots will be in the direction of those fences, and obviously they're the more likely shots to be the more powerful from the risk assessment and obviously from the studies they've done for that. And obviously that's dictated the heights and the positioning of those fences. And the dog leg fence is to protect the users of the path in that location, because the path comes round the play area, which is located behind the nursery, and then follows that dog leg. So that dog leg section is to protect the users of the path in that location. Was that all the questions answered? Sorry, Councillor Gallagher.
No, could you just sort of talk me through the fact that this used to be used for cricket a long, long time ago, and that now when I was there, you know, it was being used by a lot of people for all the other things that they like to do in the park. How would it work that suddenly, you know, these people come in and take over that whole area and would really want, for logical reasons, everybody, children included, moved away from the area? Is there a time when this is going to say this is now a cricket pitch and you can't go and have your picnic there?
Obviously, the applicant is registered to talk, which is Bill Wyatt, who's the Parks Department, and may be able to answer better. But obviously, the users of the park, and at the present, cricket can be played within the park, obviously, as can other sports. Obviously, there's formal football pitches marked out, and obviously, the users of the park will need to establish, obviously, what's taking place formally or informally, and obviously arrange themselves around that. And obviously, that's something that would happen naturally, and obviously wouldn't be something that could necessarily we could control as a planning department in that respect. But obviously, as I said, obviously Bill Wyatt maybe aren't able to answer as to how that occurs, because obviously that happens throughout parks within the borough. Obviously, there's formal arrangements within our parks as there are informal, and obviously that seems to occur without needing too much managing, I would imagine. But obviously, Bill may be able to answer that better than me.
Thanks, Jody.
Thank you.
Chair, Bill Wyatt, can I just come in there?
John, can you come back to this point when we have you to speak in a second? We've got a question from Councillor Garringer, and then we will come to speakers after that. Councillor Garringer, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, yes, please. I noticed there are 2 cricket pitches. Will they have boundaries around them, so at least people know not to cross the boundary if there's a game on? And number 2, I didn't spot, and maybe that's my fault, any time or time of year situation. Now, I mean, obviously they don't play cricket sort of in the middle of the winter. Obviously it's light quite late this time of year, but it's dark much earlier other times of the year. So is there going to be some condition as to what times people can play cricket and what time of the year they can play?
Chair, Jody Williams, Deputy Planning Manager. In regards to the use, obviously the use can exist as existing. So obviously it's not something that would be necessarily new to the park, or that we could control the hours or when that could be played. Obviously there are formal arrangements which would be made through the Parks Department for people to book those, and obviously there'll be some control in that remit. But obviously in terms of planning, obviously the use can exist as currently.
To be fair to the neighbours, I think they'd like to have some idea when cricket balls might be going over their fences, what time of year they're going to be careful, and what time of year everything will be okay because they won't be playing. So it's just a small thing for the people living around there, just to have some idea, you know, about time frames and you know, and maybe that's the sort of condition I might be looking for. Maybe we can't put it on for this, but maybe someone else can put those conditions on behalf of residents.
Chair, just to respond to that, obviously,
yeah.
I don't think we could condition the use of the artificial pitches, because obviously they're within the park setting for the public to use, obviously either informally without any sort of pre-booking, or there can be pre-booking arrangements which would be more formal and be made through the Parks Department on a weekly, monthly or perhaps yearly basis. And obviously there will be some form of control through the formal bookings. Obviously the informal bookings, it's not something we can control. And as I said, obviously the use is existing. Obviously people can turn up to that park and play cricket 11-a-side or as a small family, obviously COVID regulations permitting, obviously without the current restrictions which are in place. That could occur without any controls from the planning department. So for us, we don't feel we can add further conditions on the use, but obviously that's something that can be regulated through the formal bookings through the Parks Department.
Could we ask them to look at that? That's all I'm saying.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garringer. What we'll move on to now is this item. We did receive some written statements from residents. We take those as read because they were sent out with a pack. But do we have any questions from officers arising from those before we move on to speakers? Okay, I'm not getting anything on the chat function, so we'll move on. So the first speaker we've got today, we've got the applicant. Sorry, the first person we're going to hear from is Councillor David Hicks, who is the councillor for Belmont Ward, where the Overton Park is. Councillor Hicks, if you're there, you've got 4 minutes to address the committee. I'll let you know when the 4 minutes are up.
Okay.
If you just want to
Can you hear
introduce.
me? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we've got you.
Firstly, I'd like to say I originally supported this application because I thought it might develop the use of Overton Park. But feedback from residents has caused me concern about its impact upon the current park users and the residents. And I really ask the committee to consider that when looking at this application. I can summarise their concerns as follows. Formal cricket pitches have not existed at Overton Park for many years, and the users of the park and surrounding residents have got used to their absence. Cricket may be played, but it's informal. By proposing the installation of these 2 pitches, the council is modifying the long-established usage pattern of the park. The park has become, as Councillor Gallagher said, an open area where families, children and joggers can move without fear of injury from flying objects, unless you consider footballs to be just dangerous. A cricket ball is potentially lethal, which is why ball stop fencing is being proposed in the application. But cricket balls pose a danger to unsuspecting visitors who may be playing in the park or taking exercise. I wonder if the danger would deter people from using the park. Residents in Holland Avenue and Penzance Way have reported incidents of cricket balls falling near children in their garden and have damaged the glass and other structures. The ball stop fences must be sufficient to prevent that. But the technical report says that it will not stop the freak shots. And we're talking about amateurs playing cricket here. Signage will have to be clear enough to make visitors aware of the risks. What we don't need is one shot that results in a serious injury. Unfortunately, it's not clear from the proposals why there is a difference in height of ball stop fencing in views B and C, and whether the fences would adequately protect those using the jogging trail and the footpath to Moor Way. Residents have mentioned the disturbance created by current and past cricket matches with loud noise, music, rubbish thrown in the parks, and players using the boundary fence as a toilet. Sometimes the disturbance has started as early as 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. The complainants disagree that this is an improvement to the park, questioning for whom. Unlike football, cricket matches can be lengthy and occupy the park for several hours. There's concern about what time constraints and conditions will be put upon the use of the pitches, what control will be put in place to ensure the usage of the pitches is authorised, managed and policed, and does not cause nuisance to other park users. There is a need to improve the facilities at Overton Park, but it must be done in a responsible way. That's why I'm asking you to consider the pros and cons carefully of this application. While he's there, I also asked Councillor Shields, as chairman of the local committee, to consider the release of funds to produce a comprehensive design plan for Overton Park. That's it.
Great, thank you, Councillor. If it's okay,
you're breaking up, I'm afraid.
Sorry, I was going to say, if you don't mind waiting there for a second, so we can take questions from councillors if they have any. Before that, though, do officers want to come back on any of the points that are raised or clarify anything?
Chair, Andy Webber, Head of Planning. I don't think so. I think you're going to hear from the applicant, and I think there's a lot of issues that have already come up this evening about the competition for use in the park and the adequacy of safeguards for users of the park and people enjoying their gardens adjacent to the site as well. So you've heard what the officers have said in presentation and what's in the report. I think we'll invite Mr. Wyatt to kind of expand a little bit on what we've said already. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shields, do you have a question for Councillor Hicks or a comment?
Yep, I think am I on? Yes. Yes, I similar to Councillor Hicks, I was happy for this to come forward because obviously the formalised use of the park is of course a good thing. Councillor Hicks asked me if we could, because I chair the local committee, whether we could consider funds to be brought forward for a fundamental design plan for the whole park, and I totally agree with him. It will be a committee decision, of course, we're a democracy, but it certainly has my vote and my general agreement that something good and formal for the park, so everyone can see what is planned, how the park will evolve, and how it will become more used by more members of the community, of course, because Sutton, like so many other boroughs, is growing in numbers and often with properties without open space or park. So my short answer to Councillor Hicks is yes, I agree with him. I'd also sort of throw it open to the planning officers what our options are to review this. Should there be an accident, or should there be a groundswell of concern from residents over the activity of cricket in the park? I think the worry is at busy times.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shields. I'll ask officers if they want to come in, or whether we want to just wait for a response to that from the applicant next.
Sorry, Andy Webber, Head of Planning. I think obviously the application is recommended for approval this evening. You're going to hear from the applicant shortly. I think if there's anything that comes out of further questions and debate in terms of any concerns members have about this proposal going forward, and whether or not there's any further mitigation that can be considered, then that's probably something we can return to in debate.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions, any other questions for Councillor Hicks before we move on to the applicant? Okay, right, okay, so what we'll do now is move on to Bill Wyatt, who is the applicant for this application. I don't know if are you still on the call, Bill?
Yes, I am, yeah.
Yeah. So same as Councillor Hicks, you've got 4 minutes to address the committee, and if you can probably spend some of that time addressing some of the issues that have raised already, it might save us some time on questions later. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Hicks for raising some of the questions as well. Just to put a bit of background to this, we're looking to install 5 of these pitches across a number of sites this year. And they're funded through the London Cricket Trust, which is an organisation set up on behalf of, I'm going to try and get this right, Middlesex, Essex, Surrey and Kent cricket clubs, providing funding for sites across London, across London, to encourage a number of ways into cricket, to try and increase cricket take-up, if you like, through things like games like last man standing, youth cricket, which they're trying at the moment to reconfigure so the teams will be slightly smaller, which will require additional pitches, but also recognising the fact that we've got, as they've explained to me, teams in Sutton that are now playing in Merton because of lack of facilities, and also local teams that are looking for more places to play. They're also combining this, the funding for this, with outreach through Surrey, working with local clubs and a number of local schools to try and encourage sport and physical activity among young people, both boys and girls, throughout the borough. So hopefully it's a concerted attempt to increase uptake of physical activity in the borough. Just to move on to some of the points quickly, because I know I've not got a huge amount of time. How would we deal with other people trying to be on the pitch at the same time? To be honest, this is a perennial problem working in parks. We have baseball in parks, we've had cricket over the years, we have football throughout the winter. People tend to rub along quite well within our parks. Obviously, from time to time there are conflicts, but it's not something that was a massive issue in the past. I don't expect it to be a big issue in the future. We might have to see how that goes. It's a large site. There's probably a further 2.5 hectares of space outside of the cricket for people to use if both were being used at the same time. One councillor asked about marking the boundary. Yeah, for official games, we would expect to see a boundary marked. So that would be the responsibility of our grounds maintenance contractor, not only to manage the bookings on our behalf, but also to make sure the pitches are marked. when booked and by whom. Most likely school teams, youth teams, pretty much as cricket was in the past. So we can set the times for that, and we can look into that if there are specific issues around teams playing particularly late. I think we could come back to that if we needed to. What time of year? Predominantly summer. I mean, I've heard these called all-weather pitches. They're not. They're non-turf pitches, and the main reason for a non-turf pitch is to give a true surface. It became increasingly difficult over the years to provide a true surface to a cricket wicket in a public park setting when people will picnic on it or play football on it or whatever they do when it's out of use. And that was partly the reason for some of the decline of cricket across parks all across London, really. So it provides a solid and a true pitch whenever you turn up to play. So it's really for summer use. It's not an all-weather facility particularly. So talk about youth cricket. Just to come back, mention was made of the height of the fences. The fences are at varying heights depending on their proximity to the wicket itself. So some of them are as high as 3.5 metres, and the fence by the car park is 1.2. So that's based on the trajectory and the distance expected to be hit by a ball. And on this site, we did ask for that because we knew that the fences were a bit tighter than they are on some of our other sites. And so that those bits of fencing that you can see on the pitch should deal with all but the most hard of shots. And bearing in mind, this is for youth cricket, it was felt that was fairly unlikely to go past that. And someone asked about a review of this should things happen, and I think that would be through the E&N committee, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Almost perfect. That's great. Thank you, and thanks for covering some of the questions that have been asked. I know earlier on in the meeting, Councillor Haldane had a question that she wanted to ask with the applicant. So I'm going to start with Councillor Haldane. If she wants to join in.
Thank you. Yes, it's a bit convoluted, but if you'll bear with me. Bill, you mentioned baseball, cricket, football facilities that are in our parks in Sutton. There's also lots of basketball playing facilities. And you mentioned, whom would be using this facility if it was to be granted. And it would be being used by men and boys predominantly rather than by women and girls. Cricket is a very male dominated sport. You did mention that you wanted to increase female participation in your introduction, which I welcome. But so much space in the park being taken up to be used predominantly by men and boys. I don't know how you feel about that, if you've really thought about it. I don't mean that in an offensive way at all. How much do we look at gender within our town planning policies? I know that we're not supposed to be funding sport due to current council policy, which I think is a shame. But, should we be funding a large area of our park being taken up by what will end up only being used by men and boys? Kind of an open question, and not really directed at you, but this was my opportunity to say it. So.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. But I don't know if you want to come back on that aspect of policy for sporting parks and whether that's something we have considered.
Certainly, as far as the funding body are concerned, they're looking to promote sport for boys and girls, so men and women's sport. There's no quarter given, I don't think, as far as they're concerned, and we would encourage the same. What we are doing as a park service is we're pursuing external funding to provide good quality, long-term, sustainable facilities wherever and whenever we can, and the park service will be producing a plan pitch strategy for the borough in the next year to further seek external funding to improve facilities for any sport across the borough. So it's not our aim to provide for one gender over another.
Yeah, I don't think it is, but I can't see anything that's convinced me that you would get a 50-50 split. It is mostly going to be used by men and boys, and it's space that therefore women and girls are no longer going to be able to use.
Well, thank you. I think that might be something you want to come back to in the debate. I think we've got an answer to the technical question there in terms of our policy, but feel free to come back to it in debate. Councillor Burke, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I'm coming back to these fences again because they puzzle me. They're only 4 foot high on that left-hand side, running down by the houses, and I know there's fitness equipment. Are they protecting the people using the fitness equipment? Because there's a number of stands, there's a trim track as you go around that park. So that's the first question, why they're there. And why is it, the other thing is, if we've got 5 of these things going in, why have we got 2 in one park? Because again, I'm a bit concerned about the use of all that space for 2 cricket pitches. And it just seemed a little bit greedy. Why not just have one? And, you know, because cricket is a sport that not a lot of people take part in, as far as I'm concerned. It's not as popular as other sports. I'm happy to see one. It takes up a huge amount of space for the amount of people involved as well. And I just wonder why we put 2 in one park.
Okay, thank you. Bill, do you want to come in on that one?
Thank you, Chair. So this is sort of following a long conversation with the London Cricket Trust, looking at various sites across the borough, and it was felt that it was a site where, in fact, where those 2 wickets are is where the 2 existing wickets were, and where we could have carried on booking out grass cricket, if you like, and it lent itself quite well to 2 pitches. 2 of the other sites that we're looking at haven't really got the space for 2 pitches. We're hoping to work with the Cricket Trust to perhaps increase onto other sites across the borough next year, if this works okay.
Okay, thank you.
And the fences, sorry, could I just, I am concerned about people using that trim track, and are they protected?
Sorry, Chair, just, yeah, to come in on that. So, I mean, as there is trim track along that side, I've got a feeling that fence comes just to this side of the trim track. In effect, if there was cricket going on, then you would be able to see what was going on. Obviously, we'd expect people to be outside of the boundary if that was happening. We tried to move these fences so they deal with the fact that people are running along there. So there's a desire line where people jog around the outside. So we brought it inside of that as well. The fence along the northwest side, I think it's 3.5 meters at that point. I would have to check, but it's certainly higher than was said previously.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Geiringer has a question as well.
Thank you, Chairman. As a former sort of councillor in Belmont, and being a Belmont person myself, might you be encouraging a Belmont cricket club to partake there and see where it goes? Hello?
Is that for me, Chair?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, that the outreach workers from Surrey are looking to work with local clubs and local schools. I think they're looking to expand what's there existing, but I certainly don't think they would turn down the chance of a new club.
Maybe that's something that Tony Shields could look at, because he's looking at the whole area there.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Geiringer. I think there are some things we can do tonight in terms of the planning, and then obviously there might be a separate piece of work that the local committee might want to look at, but I don't want to tie their hands by making any decisions on their behalf tonight. But I think that's very sensible and interesting. And as someone who lives in Belmont, I might give cricket a go. Do we have any other questions for Bill at this point? Councillor Hicks raised something earlier on about signage and the management of the site. But have you thought about how this is going to be signposted? I know you said if there was a formal match, there'd be boundaries and things set up. But apart from that, are there plans for making sure it's going to be clear that people need to watch out for flying cricket balls?
We hadn't intended to put more signage up in the park, Chair. We try to avoid too much signage in parks because it just becomes clutter and people tend to ignore it. I would like to think that if a group of people that turned up in sports outfits in the middle of a pitch like that, then people would notice that cricket was going to be played. But obviously we'll take advice from local ward councillors as things go on if it becomes apparent that that's an issue.
Okay, thank you. And I think also one thing that hasn't been raised in questions that was raised earlier is about, similar to what you were just talking about, if things change and we find out that, for example, the fences don't give as much protection as we were hoping for, or there are, or the plans that we've got don't fit 100%, is there scope for any amendments to this in the future?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think where public safety is concerned, if things change and it becomes apparent that there's an issue, then certainly we would risk assess that and take appropriate action every time.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to double check the chat again. Unless there are any other questions, I'm going to suggest we move into debate. Is there anyone who wants to kick us off?
Can I come in on Councillor Haldane's point about women's cricket?
Yes, before you do, I've just got, I think Councillor Gallagher's asked for another question. So can I just take his question and then come back to you?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, we're into debate, yeah?
Oh, no, sorry, you said you had a question.
Oh, sorry.
Or you want to debate?
Yeah, are we into debate?
Councillor Foster first, because he's...
Oh, okay.
So, okay, so Councillor Foster, do you want to start us off, then I'll go back to Councillor Gallagher.
It's just the fact that this is a development position, and just taking Councillor Haldane's point, the England and Wales Cricket Board are investing £20 million in the next 2 years in women's cricket, 50 million over 5 years. So whilst women's cricket may be behind men's cricket at the moment, the investment of the England and Wales Cricket Board in women's cricket is substantial, and I think it is wrong to view this as negative because there is some form of sexist bias. Anything that encourages sport and organised sport gets kids off the streets, and I would support this entirely.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Gallagher, do you want to raise your point?
To be honest with you, I'm just not very sure about it. I still feel, okay, there's been a risk assessment done, but I just kind of think it's an area that families will be there with small children. We know how difficult it is to say to a small child, don't go there. That usually makes them want to go there. Yeah, I'm not too sure that it's a really great idea, to be honest with you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burke wants to come in.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to support it. I understand the concerns. I think I share some of them, but on the whole, I think it's a good thing. It's good to encourage sport. It's good to have this type of facility, and I think. Oddly, I agree with Councillor Haldane and with Councillor Foster. I think it's perhaps not a sport that attracts women greatly, but I think efforts have been made to change that. And I think if you haven't got it there, then women can't play it and men can't play it either. So I'll be supporting it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clare.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say I found Councillor Haldane's points very interesting and quite compelling. I hope that she might be proven wrong, but I suspect that she might not. And I think there's a broader question there for the council in terms of policy about sort of providing sport space that appeals to everyone. But I think for me personally, from the planning aspects of this, I'm not seeing any compelling reasons not to support it. I'd be interested to hear if people think there's kind of very specific planning grounds.
Thank you, Councillor Clare. I see Councillor Gallagher's asked to ask a question. Before I do that, I said I'd give Councillor Haldane an opportunity during the debate to come in if she wanted to add anything from before.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for allowing me to the chance to make those points. It's not something that we talk about a lot, and this is quite a clear example where what looks like half the park is going to get taken up by something which will be used, let's be honest, mostly by men and boys. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have it, but I'm glad I was given the opportunity to draw everyone's attention to it. I would like to see more sports facilities in our parks. I would just like for some of them to be likely to be used by people like me. So thanks for letting me say all of that, and for you all joining in and taking those points on board. And just to say what I wrote in the chat, which is that I don't disagree with what Tim said. Perhaps it would be easier to say I agree with what Tim said. I just can't see anything in the report that convinces me that enough of that money will be spent in Sutton to make sure that half of that cricket facility is used by women and girls. It's a larger issue than we can resolve this evening, obviously.
Thank you, Councillor Haldane. Councillor Gowing, you had a question. Is that directed at officers, or is it just a comment as part of the debate?
I'm trying to oh, here we go. Yeah,
there you go.
I was trying to unmute myself. Okay, now I agree with what's been said. I think it should be a unisex cricket club, just as much as for men and women and boys and girls. That should be encouraged. You know, women's cricket has taken off, just like women's football has in the last few years. So we should be encouraging it completely. So I'm with the others on that. So I would like to see it happen, but you know, we need to look at the times, how the pitches are marked out, and you know, if we can get some cricket club, men's and women's cricket club, that'd be absolutely great. But I understand, as I said earlier, that Councillor Shields and his area committee will be looking at the whole area, and maybe we can look at something sort of comprehensive that covers this as well. But I'm very much in favour of it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Garinger. We'll go to Councillor Allen, then Councillor Shields, and then I think we've covered quite a lot of the points in debate, so I'll move to the vote after that. So, Councillor Allen, do you want to come in?
Yes, I'm just, as Councillor Haldane was talking, I was reminded of Rachel Hayhoe-Flint, or should I say Baroness Hayhoe-Flint, who was the English ladies cricket captain from 1966 to 1978, and was unbeaten in 6 test matches. Cricket is not just a male sport, it is all very well represented in this country by ladies as well. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. I think we need to be careful not to, I don't think Councillor Haldane was saying at any point that only men play cricket, but I think we do have, but I take your point on board. Councillor Shields, do you want to comment, and then we'll move to the...
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think it adds to the complement of the park. I mean, there are 2 football pitches there all through the winter season, whether that's played by men or women. The football pitches are there and used. I use the park regularly, and it really is men and women, young and old, are kicking balls up against the goals, in and out of formal actual play. We have benches that have been put in specifically for people in wheelchairs, so they can sit with their carers or their friends and sit on a mud-free environment. We've increased the playground by 50%. We've got trees planted. We've got table tennis tables. What we're trying to do is make this park somewhere where people want to go, because I really believe empty parks cause problems. When the good guys are in the parks, the bad guys aren't comfortable, and I like to see participation and usage of the park, so I will be supporting this application.
Thank you, Councillor Shields. I just want to say that I agree with you. I think that parks and open spaces are great ways for the community to get access to green space, but I think it's always better when they're active spaces and where we can make the most of the space that we've got in the borough for residents. So thank you for making that point. We're going to move to the vote now. Kathy, can you move through an alphabetical roll call and take the vote for this item, please?
Okay, again, if we could vote for, against or abstain. Councillor Eric Allen.
For.
Councillor Richard Clare.
For.
Councillor Tim Foster.
I'm for.
Councillor Vincent Gallagher.
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Geringer.
For.
Councillor Amy Haldane.
For.
Councillor Tony Shields.
For.
Councillor Chris Williams.
For.
Councillor Kevin Burke.
For.
Councillor Drew Heffernan.
For.
That's 9 votes for and 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you very much. So that item is carried and that application is approved. We've now moved on to item number 7, which is an application for St James Road. We've got quite a few people who want to speak on this. We've got an applicant, an objector, and someone in favour. But as the residents, we want to, if that's okay, take a few minutes break so we can get them on signed up properly. So if we can be back in 5 minutes, I've got the time as 21 minutes past 9. So if we go back for, let's say 26 minutes past, or 25 past, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, thank you everyone. And welcome back to the committee. As I said, we're now going to move on to item number 7, which is 56 St James Road in Carshalton. Now, we've now got our registered speakers on the line. For their benefit, just so they know what will happen next. What's going to happen is officers will give a presentation on the item, and then councillors will have an opportunity to ask questions of the officers. Then once that's done, we've received some written statements on this item as well, so we'll take any questions on those, and then I'll ask residents to come in one at a time, and I'll let you know when to come in, and at that point you'll have 4 minutes to address the committee. I'll time that and let you know when that's over, and if you can stay on and then listen to any questions from councillors at that point, that'd be really helpful. And then you're free to go, and we'll debate the item and take a vote. So what I'll ask now is for Katie Johnson to give us a presentation on this item.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would just like to table an amendment to the reason for refusal. It should read, the proposed boundary treatment fronting St James Road and St John's Road, not St Andrews Road. The application, the application site comprises an industrial unit located at the junction of St James's Road and St John's Road within the St John's Road area of special local character. The immediate area is residential in character, comprising 2-storey Victorian dwellings. To the northwest of the site is Plumpton Way industrial area, and here is the new built kind of access cell storage building. This is a photograph of the site looking at it from St James's Road. This is a photograph of the site looking along St John's Road. Planning permission is sought for the erection of a 2-metre high palisade fence along the boundary of the site. The current proposal follows enforcement proceedings to remove a palisade fence seen in these photographs. The enforcement notice was complied with and the fencing was removed. The current proposal seeks permission for a similar fence, albeit painted green. In this case, planning permission is recommended for refusal on the grounds that the fence would result in an overly dominant and incongruous feature that would fail to preserve and enhance the character of the area. The site is located in the St John's Road area of special local character, which is characterised by Victorian terraced houses with small front gardens. The general character of boundary treatments in the ASLC is low brick or timber boundary walls and fences. Examples of other palisade fencing provided by the applicant are located within the industrial areas, which is sat outside of the ASLC. This is where you would typically find palisade fencing. You wouldn't necessarily find it in the residential areas. It is for these reasons and those outlined in the committee report, it is recommended that planning permission be refused, subject to the amended reason for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Katie. Do we have any questions from councillors on the item? If you can just let us know.
Yes, well, Councillor Geiring, no photos. I haven't seen any photos come up.
Okay, I can see them on here. Perhaps is Matthew still on the call? Can perhaps email them to you if you have them. If not, I might need to take some guidance on whether.
I had them on previous items. I don't know why I haven't got them now.
Okay.
I've just got a K in a blue ring.
Oh, that was Katie. Try. Can we get someone to help Councillor Geiring access the photos? So you could try and change the layout settings. I've been told. What we'll do is, while we're trying to get that to happen, maybe if Katie can stop presenting, then start presenting again, and then have a look if the photos come up. Before then, should we just get some questions from Councillor Shields, who's asked to ask a question first?
Hi. I've actually managed to get the pictures in the presentation this time round. It's a bit of a lucky draw. The building that it's against, i.e. the backdrop, looks heavy-duty commercial. Is this fencing now it is envisaged in green, not too incongruous considering the commercial background and the setting that it's in. What I'd also like to see is some views from the ASLC to see how it detracts from an ASLC.
Thank you, Councillor. Katie, do you have a?
Yes. So the industrial, it is an industrial building, but the industrial building itself is set within the ASLC. So this is the industrial building here, and obviously this is the red line of the ASLC. So the building is set within the ASLC. I suppose the only photographs. I'll just go back to the presentation, just see. These photographs showing the fence that was removed were taken from inside the ASLC, and you can see from this photograph the property here. This is the kind of the standard buildings that are in the ASLC. This is the character of the ASLC. This building is a slight anomaly, I think, within the ASLC. The majority of these two-storey Victorian dwelling houses, which is what is the character of the ASLC. So we believe having a palisade fence in this location, as it's not in an industrial area and it is in more of a residential setting, is unacceptable.
Can I go further then, Chair?
Yeah, sure.
As this is an industrial building within an ASLC, it must have some words of descriptions to ameliorate its incongruous nature. How is this listed within the ASLC setting?
The ASLC description only really refers to the Victorian two-storey dwellings with small front gardens. It's quite a short description, and that is what the description of the ASLC is in the Sutton local plan.
So the area of special local character does not note this building as anomalous within its.
No.
Within its. Okay. I suppose as the building hasn't got green railings around it, what actually is or would be, obviously with an industrial building you have the requirement for security. I can't imagine the applicants putting this up for the love of it. What olive branch do we offer?
Okay, so what in the presentation, and I'll just flick to the end. Here are a couple of examples of railings within the ASLC. Both these buildings are located towards the end of St John's Road and St James's Road, and we believe that something similar to this may be more appropriate in the ASLC.
Okay, you've actually hit on exactly the sort of thing I was thinking of, having an ASLC in the ward I represent. Obviously, we want to keep, style, context, and character. But obviously security, well, I say obviously, I don't know, but I would imagine security is the driving force for this application in itself. Okay, thank you, Katie, it's very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Shields. And we do have the applicant who will be speaking later, so you can ask him about the main function. Councillor Haldane, you have a question of officers?
Thank you. Yeah, I think I got quite a lot of it from Councillor Shields' questions, so thank you. But I just wanted to check that I understand correctly. There was a fence that was removed. There's now an application for a new fence, but we don't think this is acceptable either. And it's because of the design. But we're not anti a fence.
Yes, that's correct. So if you can see the photograph that's on the presentation now, this fence was installed without the benefit of planning permission. An enforcement notice was served for its removal due to the fact that the design was considered unacceptable. The fence was removed. I think I'm right, and the applicant may be able to clarify this, but I think they didn't appeal the enforcement notice in time, so the enforcement notice took effect, and therefore they had to remove the fence. So therefore now come back in with a planning application to erect a similar fence, albeit painted green. And we are not saying that they can't install some sort of railings, it's just we would prefer to see a different design.
But the new design hasn't yet been erected?
No, so at the moment, I think it's You can see from this photo.
Green fence is just an example.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so the photograph that I hope you can see now, you can see that there's no fencing around the boundary of the site.
Yes.
Yeah, so their intention is to put this is the planning application for this fence. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Katie. Councillor Allen?
Yes, I think the question I was going to ask has basically been answered, but it does state in the papers that similar fencing has been installed around the doctor's surgery, Smith fencing, and the storage unit. And I think the point which has been made is that the planning permission in relation to a fence is not being rejected. It's purely the design of this particular fence which is not acceptable. Is that correct?
Sorry, yes, the fencing that was installed was unacceptable. The fencing to the doctor's surgery and the self-storage unit is in a different location. It's fronting onto the main, I think it's Ride Lane, I think, and it's not within the ASLC. So I think that's why we feel in this location palisade fencing is not appropriate.
Yes, but the type of fencing which you showed the picture of with the wall and the metal railings above probably would be acceptable.
We think it would be more acceptable, yes. I'll just find them again. But yes, something similar to this we think would be more acceptable in this location.
Okay.
Thank you. I can't see anyone else who has a question at this point. What I'd like to do now is move to the written statements and again take these as read because they've been circulated. Are there any questions arising from those that members want to ask of officers? And I'll just give 10 seconds or so to wait and see. Okay, thank you. So that's written statements concluded. We now move to the point where we have our registered speakers. Now we're going to start off. We've got two registered speakers here today. We've got Rizwan Shabir, who's the applicant, and then Albina Zakan, who's writing, who will be referred to as a supporter. But what she's supporting is the officer's recommendation to refuse. So even though she's a supporter for the minute, she's against the application, if that makes sense. So we're going to start off hearing from Ms. Zakan, Mrs. Zakan, who's on the call. Mrs. Zakan, are you there?
Hello.
Hiya. We're gonna. What's going to happen now is we're going to give you 4 minutes to tell us what you've got prepared, and then if it's okay, we'll have councillors ask you a few questions, if that's all right.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, fantastic. So feel free to start whenever you'd like.
Okay, so I'd like to say good evening to everyone. So I know it's been quite a long evening, so I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak. And I'm going to keep it very brief, so I'll go straight into the points that I wanted to make. And actually the very first one is something that hasn't been mentioned in the application. And it's about the change in the boundary of the fence. I don't know if you're able to see the photographs of the boundary in 2018 versus 2016. Would you be able to confirm that?
I think if you just carry on, officers can respond to that later if we've got that available.
Okay, so you see, as you can probably see on the photographs, given the proximity of our property, so at 54 and 56, historically the 2-meter fence was laid away from the doorstep of our house, but in 2018 it has actually been moved right to the edge of the property, and actually we felt that due to the height and aesthetics of the fence, it actually created a very intrusive and unwelcoming look to our area. So I'd like to kind of be very clear about the fact that, as been mentioned before, that we're not against the idea of having the 2-meter fence, and we completely empathize with the needs of our neighbor to keep his property protected. We do, however, feel that a compromise could be achieved by keeping the fence as per the original boundary that was there pre-2018 and introduce a new fence in the alleyway, which actually was discussed probably about 4 years ago when we just moved into the property. So we feel that this solution would still provide the protection to the property along the perimeter, which is what I think the applicant is looking for, but will solve this kind of, I guess, intrusive nature of the fence. And I think one of the other things is important to consider as well, given the circumstances that we're all in at the moment with COVID-19. Our house is where we spend all of our time, and I think it's important not to underestimate the role of our homes and neighborhoods that play role in our mental well-being, you know, as a society and individuals. So that's all the points that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that and for coming to see us. I'm going to ask officers, first of all, to respond to any points that they want to raise, and I'll ask councillors if they have any questions. So both Katie, if you want to respond to any of that, particularly the question around the boundary. So I don't think that's
first, whilst Chair, it's Andy Webber, Head Planning. Before Katie responds to that, can we just ask the supporter stroke objector to clarify the point that she's making about the comparison photographs, so we can see if we've got anything to show on that?
Yeah, so there were two photographs applied. One was from 2016. That was the source of the photograph. It's the Zoopla property listing. So you can clearly see where the original 2-meter fence post was in relation to our property, in relation to 54. And where it has then been moved in 2018, where the new metal fence was installed. So
Andy Webber, Head of Planning. I don't think we have the 2016 photograph. It's mentioned it's from Zoopla, so we wouldn't have that unless it was our own photograph. But I'm not entirely sure what the specific point that's being made here. If it's a question of the positioning of the fence, that's probably a separate issue, because this evening we're only really considering the appearance of the fence as proposed. I wasn't aware there was any issues at all about whether the fence was or was not in the correct position, which I'm not sure, but I think that might be the point that the supporter.
Andy, so I think you dropped out there.
Sorry, Chair. Can you everyone hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I finished what I was saying. I was just really not clear as to whether the supporter was making a comment about the position, whether there was a dispute over the position of the fence line, which is what I kind of gleaned from that that statement, because that's not something that we were aware of was an issue until this evening. If that is indeed the point.
Okay, thank you. I might take any questions from councillors at the moment, and then maybe the objector/supporter can just clarify if it is the positioning of the fence that she meant. Do we have any questions from any councillors? Okay, no, I think that's fine. Mr. Khan, sorry, can you just so we're 100% clear, are you saying that there was the fence itself was in a different position initially, and that's the issue that you were raising?
Yes, that was actually one of the things that was raised in the complaint in 2018 when the new fence was raised. So this has been communicated to the council.
Okay.
I think the photographs that were supplied yesterday had examples of how the fence would look like again when it raised again from our point of view. So when you're entering our property rather than 56. and it's very close proximity to our doorstep.
Okay, thank you. We do actually have a question from Councillor Geiringer for you. So if you can listen out for that one, Councillor Geiringer.
Yeah, I'm around. Yeah, it's very difficult for me here because I've seen no photographs whatsoever. What I see on the agenda is a pretty awful looking fence, which will look absolutely awful in an area of special local character and an area of archaeological interest. But obviously, if one could have a fence that's attractive and looks nice and fits in, I wouldn't object to it. But it's very difficult sitting here without any photographs. And I'm making the suggestion that in future we should have these sort of meetings. We should have photographs sent to us with the agenda. That will mean that at least I've got photographs to look at, as opposed to a screen just with a K on it.
Sure. Okay. No, thank you, Councillor Geiringer. We'll take that as the comment. And when it comes to the vote, you'll I imagine the same guidance will come into play the same as if you dropped out. That you need to make a decision whether you've had enough information to make a vote on it. Otherwise, you might want to abstain on the vote. But that's a question for you at the end. Okay, I think that's it from. So thank you to Mrs. Zakan. I don't think we have any other questions. So thank you for your time. What we'll move on to now is the applicant. So that is Mr. Shabir. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi there. The same thing applies as before. So what we've got is a 4-minute. We'll set on a timer for you to address the committee, and then if you can stay on the line, so if any members of the committee have questions for you, you can answer them. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you want to begin whenever you'd like, and I'll start the timer.
Yeah. First of all, thank you to all the respected councillors who have given me the opportunity to speak today and be on here. I had something, all the notes written out, but I think I'll cut straight to and answer to some of the things raised in the last few minutes. This fencing issue has been going on for several years now, and you know, there's a lot of things that's been going backwards and forwards with the councillors, the few local ones, with MPs. Previously, we had Tom Brake involved. We've got MP Elliott involved as well now. And, you know, from day one, it's just been so difficult to deal with the council. It's just been such hostility from the council that it's been unbelievable. Some of these things which have not come out before have come out today, which we've never heard of before, so we haven't had a chance to address them. So if all the previous points that they've been taking up all these years, I've kind of written out how I'm going to address those, but the points that have been highlighted now in the last 10 minutes or so are completely different to what this whole application has been about over the last few years. Now, the ASL thing that the lady mentioned, if she can just bring that map up again, I just want to clarify that there are a few industrial units which come inside that, which are just opposite to the rear of our unit. They have palisade, and not having the photos here, that's unfair. Likewise, where the big gas station used to be, so if you're looking at the front where that green fencing is, if you look to the left, you would clearly see the palisade fencing from here. So I don't think the angles of this have been shown correctly. I want to go back to the point that the neighbour is mentioning about this new boundary thing. The boundary where the fence has been made has never been an issue. And I just want to clarify for the councillors who are listening, we had given unrestricted access to number 54 to use our property. If you see the boundary lines, we had given them free access to use that property to that access way, which they're claiming now, where the fence has been built. But the reason we built on that is because that fence had been broken for many years. So now that we are fixing it for security purposes, it's only correct that we cover up our boundary. If the previous boundary had been broken in several places, and we're getting around to fixing it, obviously we're going to address that issue. And just for our neighbours' sake, for their convenience, we added an extra gate in there, and it's very upsetting to see that they are being difficult about this when we've given them an extra gate for the access. What they're suggesting is that we push our boundary back, which will we will lose our security, which is pretty much needed for our site. We have over £100,000 of goods in there. We are an online retailer. You know, I think stuff is coming in and out. We need security because it's a high security site. We've had break-ins, like a few break-ins, attempted break-ins. The last break-in we had, they just parked outside and walked straight into the warehouse and stole the goods. Now, we can't ignore that this is a warehouse. We've paid money for it as a warehouse. We're using it as a warehouse. It has A2 use, it has B2 use, B8 use, and it's been around for 60 years with this fencing, which is over 2 meters height. Now, after everything that's been said, I know it comes down to like or dislike of the fencing, but like and dislike is subjective to the person looking at it. And I can assure you that 99% of my neighbours, I can promise you, I'm an honest person, they've come up to me and said, we like the fence that you've done, and thank you for sorting this mess out. And the problem is, which the council is kind of not being honest about, is the number 58 is a council worker who actually used to work in the planning department, Mr. Gavin Calthorpe. And he has been making life extremely difficult for us from the time he moved in, roughly 2 years ago. He is the only one who's teamed up with number 54 to make life as maximum difficult for us as possible. We've tried to have these consultations where what would the council want, what would the council be happy with. They haven't come back with anything. Some of the stuff they've mentioned is, why don't you...
So thank you, sir. 4 minutes is, so that's your 4 minutes. Thank you for that. I'm gonna, before we move on to councillor questions, we're gonna go to officers first, if that's okay. So Mr. Webber wants to come in.
Yes, Mr. Shabir, of course, we've had correspondence about the very allegation that you've made that a member of my staff has had undue influence in this process. And we wrote to you back in March, I believe, on this as part of a stage 1 complaint and said there's no case to answer. You haven't taken it to stage 2 complaint, so I'm quite surprised that you're raising this again in a public forum this evening. Can I finish? No. Can I finish what I'm saying? Mr. Calthorpe, as a resident of the borough, is perfectly entitled to raise objections to planning applications that affect him. And the application is coming before planning committee. So your allegation that there's any wrongdoing on behalf of the planning service and Mr. Calthorpe in particular can be put to one side, because it'll be the councillors who'll be making a decision on this application and no officers. So I do, Chair, I feel very strongly that that point needs correcting publicly.
Thank you. Mr. Shabir, sorry. I've got quite a lot of councillors that want to ask you questions, so I'm going to go to them.
Yeah, but sorry, Mr. Andy just asked me a question because the stage 2 email was sent to him, and he said because of the COVID, we can extend it by another 2 months. So that is still pending and ongoing. So I'd like to clarify that. Did Mr. Andy Webber get my email about the stage 2 or not?
Okay, I think this is something we can that might be better taken off offline. We've got to make a decision based on planning terms here today, and it'll be, as Mr. Webber said, councillors making that decision. Any complaints process is something separate from today. So I'm going to ask councillors to come in, if that's okay. Councillor Haldane has a question, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think just before you were about to run out of time, you maybe were going to say that you had tried to talk to the council about what type of fence or application might be acceptable. I just wanted to ask you to talk about that a little bit, please.
Yeah, I mean, I want to clarify because it's unfortunate that we don't have the previous, when the enforcement notice came and all the previous information. It goes back quite a long time. As I said, 4 minutes doesn't do me justice, and this whole thing being rushed tonight is not an accurate description of what we've been through. The original thing which they accused us of, the reason why they built the case, why they said we're not allowed to have the fence, is because they used a county act which states that we cannot build a fence over 1 meter high facing a highway. This is a very vague county act which they've used to kind of enforce something which they wanted. When I took that up with many professionals, they said that you've had the previous height 2 meters. That shouldn't be the reason. Now, that was the main reason. Let me make this clear. That was the only reason they had. That was the only legal grounds they made for this whole case. Now, when this was addressed legally and going back with the planning application, etc., now suddenly it's changed to other things, and that 1 meter thing has gone out the window basically. But because we've had the previous fencing at 2 meters, we are legally allowed to replace that with 2 meters because that was there for over 50 years. So we are simply just replacing the previous height with the new height, which is not wrong. Now, in terms of the style of the fencing, as I said, that's purely subjective to the person looking at it, and we have chosen this because of the strength and the protection it gives. The examples they've given us of the properties down the road, which have the round top and the black style fencing, that is easily something anyone can climb on there. Even the kids swing on that. Anyone can just jump over that and break in. With the fencing we have, the palisade, it's used across the country. Around the corner, it's used in a good few properties because it has the spikes on top. At night time, when there's no one there, it's not easy for someone to just climb on the top and jump over. So there's a lot of reasons why we've chosen this fencing. Now, going back to your question, when we've gone to the council and said, look, first of all, they were being difficult about us going over 1 meter, even though the neighbours opposite, Mr. Gavin Calthorpe, even our neighbour that works in the council, he also has a 2 meter block fence, block white wall fence, which to me looks horrendous. That's my opinion, but I'm not the one trying to make him take it down. But the point is that when we suggested all these things, some of the things, they were just like messing us around. They were not being straight with us. And some of them suggested, oh, why don't you put a brick wall or a block wall? That kind of stuff would block out the view of people coming around the corner. With this fencing, the highway people have also said that it's not blocking the sight of line coming around the corner. Many of the residents have said that it looks nice, appropriate. It gives us security. As the council people are on the call right now, and Mr. Andy Webber, the head, has decided to come on as well. Can you please suggest to me what kind of fencing there is in the market that would withstand a group of thugs, vandals coming in vans and breaking into my site, which I have CCTV security of? And this is the same council who said to me in one of the correspondence, which I have emails of.
Thank you, Mr. Shabir. I think we're straying a little bit, Mr. Shabir. I think we're straying a little bit away from this particular application in front of us.
Sorry, the fundamental argument, the point I want to answer is about the style of fencing. If they are suggesting metal fencing, the net style, that can just be cut with a wire cutter. The round fencing that they mentioned from down the road, that's also metal. The only thing is the shape is round from the top, but anyone can jump over that. Anyone can just cut through that. It's so easy, single bars. So when I put this fencing up, I've sought advice from professionals who put up fencing. That's their job. When they put it up, they
thank you. I think we've taken from that well, obviously as councillors have to balance security and the aesthetics of the fence, but I'm going to ask Councillor Shields if he's got a particular question, and then I'm going to ask Andy Webber to come back on any issues that have been raised, and then we'll move to debate. Councillor Shields.
Well, it's a question to Mr. Shapir. I know the frustration in your voice, sir. I also note that this has taken 25 weeks or half a year, whichever is the greater. Would you be prepared to meet the committee members on site and discuss the boundary treatment, the type of fencing, and actually get to the bottom of this? Because I personally think you've been agonising over this for long enough. Let's just reach a decision that we're all happy with. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely happy with that. I mean, I go to the local councillors, MP, they're all friendly with me. They all decided to take my case on. There's a reason they're doing that. I'm a law-abiding citizen. We're hard-working people. I'm more than willing to come to a compromise. I'm not a rigid person or being difficult, but the difficulties come from the other side. And this is my problem. This is my frustration. Because the goalposts to keep changing. As I mentioned here, the things that were mentioned previously have not come up today. Today it's completely different stuff, which I've never heard of before.
So what you're really saying is there is an answer there. We all want to reach it, and we'd like the council to do its bit and reach a compromise, a solution that is going to secure your property to your satisfaction and meet the satisfaction or the requirements of local residents. I'm sure there's an answer there somewhere, but if we haven't found it in 25 weeks, I don't think we'll find it in another 25 weeks unless we actually get on site, do our job, and get a decision made.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Webber to come in at this point to deal with any issues that have been raised, and then I think we'll move on.
Well, first of all, I'm afraid, Tony Shields, with respect, I'm not sure colleagues can comment on the amount of time we've had the application, but I don't think a site visit is really something that that I would see necessary in this case. I think we've seen all the evidence this evening. You've seen the photographs. You've seen what's proposed. You've seen examples of what might be more permissible in the area, which I think you yourself have commented on was probably more in keeping. I'm not sure what the applicant means by new matters being raised tonight, because everything's in the report. Nothing new has been raised. Certainly not by officers anyway, and certainly there are a lot of matters that he has raised tonight in terms of references to a member of my staff who I think he would need to deal with outside of this committee meeting by writing into our complaints team. So I've got no record of a follow-up to a stage 1 complaint. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if I can come back to Mr. Webber then.
Yeah.
Well, as I say, Mr. Webber, this has been the one beauty of online applications is I've got a separate iPhone here showing up different photographs, different aspects, things that are not being shown with respect by members of your team, different outlooks. And I'm really not very happy that members of the public can send me completely contradictory pictures and different views, and we're meant to swallow what is served up on the screen by the authority. We haven't had a 360 view of this. I make no accusation whatsoever. However, I would like to me this is a, I can't say the word I feel. This is a ridiculous situation which should have been sorted out long ago. And photographs that are coming up on my iPhone as I speak do not concur with what I'm being shown by your officer's presentation. So I suggest most certainly that we meet on site and leave it and defer it for now, because this is going to get a little bit silly because of the contradictory evidence, and that's the trouble with online meetings. I think I quite like them sometimes.
Chair, sorry to prolong the evening, but I'll come back on that. We're deciding a proposal, and you've got the proposal, which is the applicant's own drawing. You've seen photographs of the site. I don't know what's contradictory, Councillor, I'm afraid. I think you've got all the information in front of committee this evening to be able to make a sound decision on this application. And I disagree. I don't think there's a need for any further delay, because this would incur a further delay. And I think you are able to make a decision on this evening, Chair.
So what pictures of the officer presenting holding back? Because I'm getting contradictory evidence right in front of me.
Okay, so can I just come in on this one? I think if we go to the report, one of the reasons for refusal is its height and design. I think that's something you've raised already. I think we can make a decision today on this item. That doesn't preclude any fence coming forward in the future that's more closely aligned to the pictures that we've seen later on in the presentation with a better design. So I'm not saying that this has to be the final decision on the boundary for this property, but I think we do have enough evidence today to make a decision on this particular design around the property. So I think
I think possibly you're right in that we do have enough information, etc., etc. But I'm just thinking about this, and the applicant has erected a fence in the past, which he had to pay for and then pay for the removal of and disposal of. Has now paid for a planning application to the council, which, if we are going to take it this evening, it looks like it's going to get refused because of the planning grounds. But everyone agrees that a fence is appropriate, in this location, and that a fence will be erected at some point. If we refuse it tonight, send him away, he has to put in another application, which is another expense, and it's going to be a negative dealing with the council and with the planning department, because, you know, it's twice bitten. I'm not suggesting that the council or the planning department have done anything wrong, but it's not been great situation for either party. Could we, I don't know if there is any room for us to defer it, amend the application somehow so that we could approve it based on a different design at a later stage and not cause the applicant any more out-of-pocket expenses.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I think I'll take that as a question in a second. I think, Councillor Allen, do you have a point of order? Is that what you've raised point of, or is it just something you want to come in on during the debate?
No, it is. I'm also have some photographs sent to me of the surrounding area, and quite honestly, this looks more of an industrial area with a large gas hopper in the background, only a short distance from this site. But also, I'm very concerned that if a stage 2 complaint has been made, why were we not informed that one of the complainants, objectors, was actually a council planning officer? I do find this rather distressing that this information was not given to us in the first place.
Okay, so Councillor, I mean, I would say on that that's not a planning consideration, and that's what we need to make a decision on. And also, I think that any member of the council has the same right as every other resident in this borough to engage with the planning process in the normal way. So I don't think we should give any time to that during our deliberation on this item. What I will do though is I'm going to go to.
I find there's a great concern. If we were aware that this was a council planning officer who had actually objected to it, then we might have been able to make a decision. I think this should be deferred. I don't think we should be making a decision on this.
Chairman, I've been trying to get in and you haven't called me.
Sorry, Councillor Gowringer. If that's okay, Councillor Gowringer, I'm going to ask Andy to just come in on the point that was raised by Councillor Haldane, and then I'll go to you if that's okay.
Yep. Okay.
Councillor Haldane, my understanding is, because there's been a number of enforcement cases opened on this site, and the planning enforcement team, I believe, have given some informal advice to the applicant about what might be acceptable, but I don't think that advice has been followed. So that's the answer to that question. I'm going to invite colleagues from legal to comment on the matters that Councillor Allen has raised, because it's immaterial to the merits of the planning considerations in front of you this evening, who the identity of an objector is. It's before planning committee, so there is a fair and transparent process, but I'll invite legal if they want to make any further comments on that.
Yes, hello, Alison Letts, legal officer. Now, I do concur with Mr. Webber that obviously any resident, irrespective of their employment status or the location of their employment, should be free to make representations upon an application which affects them. And the identity of any objector is not necessarily relevant. Their address may be, but not their personal identity. Thank you.
Well, I think the material fact of this is actually someone who works within the planning department. I have no objection to any resident making an objection, but we should at least have been informed that the objector in this case actually works for the planning department.
Okay, well, I think sorry, Alison, were you coming back on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have to say I do disagree with you, Councillor Allen. I think it's absolutely important that everybody is able to make a representation on an application which directly affects them, to maintain that their employment status with the council should be made public. It does give rise to the assumption that there is possibly something untoward going on, and that absolutely isn't the case. It's imperative that everyone is free to make a representation. The nature of their employment should have no bearing whatsoever upon that. To suggest otherwise suggests that the council is not being run in a fair and transparent manner.
Well, if that is the case, then why, for item number 8 this evening, which was an application by someone who's employed by the council, was that made aware to us in the first place so that we can make a decision?
Because if it's an application directly made by a member of staff, that has to be noted in accordance with the council's constitution, and consequently has to be referred to this committee. So that is a council constitution point. Thank you.
The same applies to someone who's actually making a complaint or bringing an objection. If he works for the council, that should also be noted.
Well, I think so. You've had the legal answer to that question, and as a point of order, I think we're going to leave that there. Councillor Geiringer, I think we have started a strange debate, so I'm happy to just move into debate now. But Councillor Geiringer, if you had a particular question you had on this thing, or you can start the debate off.
Well, I just want to say something. I mean, I totally support Councillor Shields, but we should defer for a site meeting. The reason is, I mean, I haven't been sent any photographs. No photographs have come up tonight. All I see is Katie Johnson's name with a ring with a K on it. Not a single photograph, not a single diagram. The only thing I've got is the site map that was sent to me with the papers. And how on earth can I make a proper decision without even seeing any photographs? They should have been sent to me. So I think the only fair thing is to have a site meeting where I can actually see it for myself. And I think one or two others have called for a site meeting. I mean, if you have a site, defer for a site meeting, and then we'll get it sorted next time.
Okay, I mean, before we get a response to that, I'm going to ask legal to come in on that particular thing you've raised about not having full access to the picture stay, and what implications that has on any decision you make tonight, and whether
I've had no access to photographs.
Yes, I know. That's what I'm saying.
I thought, Alison Letts, legal officer, I thought this issue is going to be addressed by the committee clerk forwarding photographs via email.
We're supposed to have those photographs. Photographs should be with the committee papers.
Okay, well, we can do that for next time. I think so. Councillor Gowring, I think you might have been emailed them during this meeting from planning officers when they realised you didn't.
My iPhone,
Councillor Gowring, that's fine, Councillor Gowring. But well, for next time, we'll make sure that you get them before. Andy, Councillor Gowring, I've taken that point on board. Don't worry. Mr. Webber.
Yeah, Chair, I'll be obviously guided by what committee decide on this, but frankly, when we release any report to Plan Committee, all the details in the report are available well in advance of the meeting, and obviously it's incumbent on members to familiarise themselves with the report, but also the site. This site is clearly visible from the public domain, and there's no reason for any accompanied site visit with or without officers. So I really do think, Chair, that it's just going to cause unnecessary delay in the suggestion this is deferred for a site visit. And as I said, members have had the opportunity to go and have a look at this site, and I'm sure some have done before this evening. So I'm not sure what advantage, deferring it for a site visit would be.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shields, I've got a lot of people who want to come in, so I'm going to go to them first. So the first person, well, I say a lot actually. I say Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just switching myself on. I thought this afternoon I was doing what everybody would have done, and that is walk round to St James's Road and have a look at the building in situ. St James's Road is a residential road. You can see from the map, from the which is enclosed with the papers, that properties have very small front gardens, virtually box-sized in some cases, and the vast majority of them are very well tended. You get a distinct impression of the people, the families who live in that road. I would also say that, or suggest that some of the photographs that we have seen have been, and I think particularly the architectural drawing actually makes the works look a lot larger than it in fact is. It makes it look a lot longer and taking up a greater amount of the road than it is. It is, I would argue, a relatively small area, but it does stand out as being, I have to say this, quite unkempt. Vegetation is overgrowing it. There is refuse that has clearly been there for some time, and I can understand how residents might feel that it is, for want of a better phrase, slightly lowering the tone of the neighbourhood. All that aside, I think that the issue before us is quite simple and quite straightforward. A fence was erected that was out of keeping with the character of this road, and when the applicant seeks to have that reinstated, I don't see how that would then suddenly miraculously fit in to the character of the road. I haven't yet heard anything that makes me seriously doubt that the recommendation to refuse planning permission should be supported. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on, just double check that people who commented and residents are able to leave the meeting now. As we moved into debate, the questioning's over. So if I ask community services to do that, and what we'll then do is move to the debate in full. We are coming towards the end of the evening, so we want to make some sort of decision by 2:45. So if I can ask that members, when they comment, if they can be brief but summarise all the points they want to make, that would be really helpful. Councillor Gallagher is coming next.
I tend to agree with Chris. I mean, I know the area, and it is residential. It's not. It's nearby to some industrial units, but where this we're talking about is residential. These nice little units. I went round there a few days ago, and looking at the photographs of the illegal fence that was erected, I can quite understand that was okay, certainly not suitable for the area. To have one that's green, I don't really think that sort of improves the problem. And what we're talking about here is that, as I agree with Councillor Shields, that it needs a fence along there for security, and there should be one, and there is no problem in finding one that actually looks in keeping with the area that would pass another sitting. So I will be voting against this particular application. Hopefully that a better one will come along that we can pass. Thank you.
So thank you. Councillor Foster, do you want to come in?
Sorry, I only just put the note in. It was really only to make a comment. I know Councillor Shield mentioned a gas holder in one of the photographs. That's no longer there. It's been removed. So some of these photographs and reliance on photographs is perhaps a little bit misleading.
I didn't mention a gas holder.
Somebody mentioned a gas holder earlier.
Not me.
Oh, well, I apologise. I heard the gas holder mentioned in one of the photographs. And I, like Councillor Gallagher, I look at it and say, yeah, we need a fence, but it's got to be the right fence for the area. And it's straightforward. What's in front of us tonight is this fence, and the application is not suitable. I appreciate Councillor Haldane's concern for the applicants' financial position, etc. But the reality is we're here to judge a planning application, and the planning application, the recommendation is to refuse, and I support that. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Foster. As we're moving on with the time, and we've had a number of different possible outcomes suggested, what I'm going to suggest is we now take a vote on the officer's recommendation as it stands, and then see where we are once that vote is taken, if we have to amend it or do something else. So Kathy, do you mind going through a roll call on the officer's recommendation as it stands?
Okay. So the recommendation, if I could ask you to say refuse, not refuse, or abstain. So Councillor Eric Allen.
I'm against the officer's recommendation.
So not refuse.
Not refuse.
Yeah. Councillor Richard Clare.
On balance, I support the officer's recommendation to refuse.
Councillor Tim Foster.
Refuse.
Councillor Vincent Gallagher.
Refuse.
Councillor Peter Geringer.
Well, I'm mindful to refuse, but I'm going to abstain because I haven't seen the photographs.
Councillor Amy Haldane.
Not refuse.
Councillor Tony Shields.
I'm going to not refuse. I'm not going to abstain. I'm going to dissent. I think this planning application, as it's served up, is a disgrace. Members of this committee have not, and have repeatedly said to the committee chairman, they have not been in receipt of the information. It's taken 25 weeks. I dissent, and we will talk about this very soon, because this is disgraceful. This brings this authority into disrepute.
Okay, Councillor Shields.
Okay, I'll mark that as abstain.
No, you mark it as dissent.
Okay. Councillor Williams.
Refuse.
Councillor Burke.
Refuse.
Councillor Drew Heffernan.
Refuse.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. So it's not his. So we've got 6 to refuse, 2 to not refuse, 1 abstain, and 1 abstain with dissent.
Okay, 2, 6. So can you just go through those numbers again? Sorry. So
Sorry.
6 to refuse.
Yeah. 2 to not refuse.
Yeah.
1 to abstain, and 1 to abstain with dissent.
Okay.
Abstaining with dissent is worth 4 votes, Chairman.
Thank you. I don't think that is in the council constitution, Councillor Shields.
I'll see you about that later.
Okay. I need to make a formal declaration. So the officer's recommendation is supported, and the application is refused. That therefore concludes today's business. I'd like to thank everyone who's been here today. I know, again, it's another long committee, but hopefully as we move through these and get more use, and they'll be a little bit quicker. And as we move through the backlog, we'll get shorter meetings. So thank you very much for your time. And I shall see you on the first Wednesday of July, if not.